Hi, I'm Grant Yoakum. I'm an academic writing advisor here with the University of Windsor Writing Support Desk. I'm also a former TA and GA at the University of Windsor and a member of part-time faculty. I've been sort of on all sides of this issue. You can see behind me my two University of Windsor degrees. I'm a former student here as well. I'm here to talk to you first and foremost about academic integrity, plagiarism avoidance, and plagiarism detection today. But I'm going to start by talking about how writing support can help your students. I'm just going to share my screen here and take you through a brief tour of our services because these will be handy for your students. So you can see straight from our website here, our stats are strong. Most find the service helpful or useful. Most wish they had visited earlier in their program, and most would recommend to a friend or a colleague. I'm one of these people that never used writing support through my 4 degrees, going on 5, but I should have. That was silly because as students or researchers, we should use all of the resources at our disposal and bring them to bear in order to ensure our success. What resources do we have? The best way that we can help a student, and this is graduate student, undergraduate student, we meet with students all the way up to the doctoral level, is through a one-on-one consultation. These are 25-minute meetings that go pretty intensively into student writing. That we are right now, because of the pandemic, conducting through Microsoft Teams. To book one of these appointments, it's through success.uwindsor.ca. Log in with your user ID and password, select writing support, select appointments, view calendar, pick one that works for you, and this is important. Fill out what you want help with. Right? This helps us be prepared to help the student and then select book appointment. Now, there is such a thing called term paper season, so this is why we mention it's best to book a week or more in advance. Nonetheless, what can we talk about during these meetings? From the moment a student receives their assignment prompt, we can identify action words and help them interpret the prompt. We can help them in planning the structure of their response to an assignment prompt. We can help with issues grammatical in terms of sentence structure, in terms of logical flow. We do citing and referencing help, which is important to the topic today. So we can help with almost any aspect of a student's academic writing. Now, we are not a proofreading service, but we do help students develop the skills to empower them to improve their writing. So that's what we do. So the appointments are the best way that we can help students. It's important. If you're a GA or TA, it's important that you know and be able to refer to students to the resources at their disposal. In addition to this, we have a workshop series. Our workshop series for winter 2022, the schedule is now up. And you can see there are a variety of topics, from tenses to punctuation to essay construction to citing and referencing. We have new this semester a PowerPoint lecture, and new this in the past year. We also have an inclusive language workshop, which is an important topic in both academic writing and in speech. So this workshop series, everything's fallen on Wednesdays, one in the afternoon and one in the evening, but mostly on Wednesdays. That is, like, here's a Saturday one. But nonetheless, these workshops are there for any student at the University of Windsor, and they will help students improve their writing. So to To enroll in the workshop, it's just the same way you would for an appointment, success.uwindsor.ca, log in, select writing support. This time select workshops and pick from the menu there, right? And enroll. Now to access, because they're all hosted on our Blackboard page, there is a self-enrollment link here if you need access to it. You don't automatically have access, but nonetheless, by clicking this button here, or what's more, this one down here, you can gain access to our Blackboard page. In addition to this, where are they? We have a whole series of video tutorials that we've put together. Here's one on academic integrity and plagiarism avoidance. The three most common citation styles and various other topics in academic writing. So these are on our website, and they're on our Blackboard page as well. And if students are wondering if they can get the PowerPoint, yes, you can have all of our PowerPoints there on Blackboard as well. So that is how we can help you. So the name of the game today is Academic Integrity, Plagiarism Avoidance, and Plagiarism Detection. I'm doing this in two parts. The first part is an introduction to academic integrity and plagiarism avoidance. This is a presentation that I've given a few times in orientations. So this is basically what I tell students, right? That'll be the first part, right? And in this presentation, I talk about academic integrity related to scholarly communities, et cetera, et cetera. After part one, we move to plagiarism prevention and detection. Where we will identify a whole bunch of plagiarism red flags and help you prepare to prevent plagiarism, cases of plagiarism in the courses that you're assisting with. So this should be fun. Academic integrity, it's a topic I love and I hate, and I love to hate, right? It's one of these things. Academic integrity, first slide, will define it, and I'll tell you why I like it. It refers to a code of conduct that establishes trust and rigor in academic work, as well as an environment conducive to scholarly collaboration and the dissemination of knowledge and understanding. Universities generally, as well as members of faculty and students, all depend on this set of mores that governs scholastic conduct and communication in order to maintain honesty, rigor, and fairness across the entire academic community. So without these standards, the value of both the university degrees and scholarship would be highly suspect. So academic integrity, really by this definition, shows itself to be sort of the glue that holds this giant scholarly community of collaborators together, right? It's a trust environment. If I am going to disseminate my ideas and my research, I have to do so in a context where I am giving credit where credit is due, and I'm getting credit where credit is due as well, right? So these things go hand in hand, right? So this code of conduct and this set of mores enable research to occur in the sort of disciplinary, collaborative modality that we have at a university. So, right, that's what I like about academic integrity. On the other hand, what I don't like about academic integrity issues is when they arise, it seems to violate the very principles that a university works upon, right? And that's frankly what it is, right? So the Office of Academic Integrity at the University of Windsor expands on this notion. It's more than just plagiarism and cheating. It means centering your academic journey around those core values of honesty, respect, fairness, and responsibility. So at the University of Windsor, students, faculty, and staff are expected to contribute to a positive environment where academic integrity is upheld all of our work. Student code of conduct echoes this. by noting that by accepting admission to the academic community at the University of Windsor, students are obliged to conform to these standards of behavior, academic and non-academic, that benefit all members of the academic community, right? So these kind of go hand in hand in order to establish the importance of maintaining this environment where we can trust one another well enough to collaborate. So, plagiarism. This is found in Section 2, Subsection 1 of the Student Code of Conduct. At the beginning of my courses, when I teach courses, I read the full definition, right? And it's important to do so, right? Just so that everybody knows that this is an important topic that will be treated seriously, right? So, plagiarism, the act of copying, reproducing, or paraphrasing significant portions of one's own work or someone else's published or unpublished material from any source, including the internet, without proper acknowledgement, representing these ideas as either new or as one's own, right? So that introduces the idea that you can self-plagiarize. You submitted a paper here, and then you're resubmitting a significant portion of that paper somewhere else without noting that and without permission to do so. That is a case of self-plagiarism. So plagiarism applies to all intellectual endeavors, creation and presentation of music, drawing, design, dance. You might not think about that, but dance, photography, and other artistic and technical works. Right? Students have the responsibility to learn and use the conventions of documentation as accepted by their area of study, and instructors have the responsibility of informing students in writing of any significant individual interpretations of plagiarism. So there are responsibilities on both sides of the coin here, right? And what I would point out about this definition is that, well, first off, plagiarism is a form of theft, whether you're stealing it from yourself or stealing it from someone else. When you fail to give credit to the author of the work and in fact claim that it is your own or something new, right, that is a form of theft. Plagiarism tries to pull a fast one on a system in the context of a university that evaluates how well you understand and can work with the material at hand, right? If a student submits something plagiarized, we can't evaluate how well they have understood or are able to work with the material at hand because they haven't done it. They've sidestepped it, right? So plagiarism is the cardinal academic sin. So what's the difference between plagiarism and research? Both use sources, right? And using sources in research is encouraged, right? Universities invest a good deal of resources maintaining libraries and a good deal of training of university students to do this kind of research. This is sort of the unique selling point of the university. We train researchers, right? So if you want to engage with your field, you can use these sources and that which has come before in order to enhance your understanding and in order to buttress your claims. So academic disciplines themselves are built on the foundation of previous research that propel inquiry forward. We're not starting from scratch every generation. Now, both plagiarism and academic research make use of sources. Researchers, on the one hand, meticulously document their sources and make clear distinctions between work that's come before and what the researcher is adding to the discussion. Plagiarists, however, fail to give proper credit to their sources. So while the researcher employs rigorous methods to ensure honesty and transparency, what the plagiarist does is deceptive. So that's the diff. Intentional plagiarism. Now, most cases of plagiarism you'll encounter won't be intentional. That said, I have encountered very many intentional cases of plagiarism. When students are pressed for time or suffering from a lack of confidence, they may be tempted to just grab something from external sources like the internet. Frequent ones are like Spark Notes, that sort of thing, Wikipedia, to complete their assignments. right? This becomes a big problem when these students present these words or ideas as though they're their own. Well, it's plagiarism, right? The worst cases of plagiarism, students sometimes buy a paper from the internet and hand it in as though it is their own work. I had this happen in the first course I taught for Oakland University over in Rochester Hills, Michigan. I was teaching an ethics course, and a student submitted their third paper, and something seemed fishy about it. So I started Googling sections of the paper, and I found it. You know where I found it? On a website called cheathouse.com, where students can buy papers that meet the prompt from their classes. The problem is, well, several problems with that, right? But the problem for this student was that these papers are frequently themselves plagiarized like crazy, right? If your goal is to run a business that sells students papers so that they can cheat in their classes, academic integrity is not very important to your company, is it? All right. Now, when confronted with this, the student was incensed because this is not a plagiarized paper. I paid for an original paper. So that consumer outrage kind of missed the mark there. It was a case of malicious or intentional plagiarism. So, right. You know, more frequently, you'll come across significant chunks taken from pages like SparkNotes, right? Now, even if a student paraphrases, condenses, or selects from these works, the words or ideas still belong to the original author, and failing to properly credit the original source is a misrepresentation of the student's actual work and a case of plagiarism, right? So, right. This is, for the most part, not what you will encounter as plagiarism, although there are cases, right? Unintentional plagiarism is much more common. This is sort of a weird case. Sometimes plagiarism isn't an intentional act or a case of cheating. Because these things can result from careless academic work, right, instead. So even if students do not intend to cheat, it's their responsibility to properly document any source that they use and adhere to current scholarly procedures. The metaphor would be walking into a store, looking at something, and thoughtlessly putting it into your pocket and leaving the store, right? It wasn't intentional theft, but it was theft, right? So these cases must be addressed as well. So some examples of unintentional plagiarism: failure to cite a source. That's not common knowledge, right? Now, what's common knowledge differs from discipline to discipline and from context to context. So it's writing support's constant refrain is, if you're not sure if you need a citation, cite it, right? Failure to quote or block quote the author's exact words, even if cited, right? You need quotation marks again around 3 or more significant words taken from any source, right? So if somebody forgets to do that, right, even if they cite, that's a case of plagiarism. Failure to put a paraphrase in their own words, even if it's cited, right? Because a paraphrase is only a paraphrase if it's paraphrased. And switching words around with a thesaurus or using a paraphrasing program, which basically does that for you, is not enough, right? In order to paraphrase or likewise summarize, what you have to do is understand the source, digest the source, and it's best to paraphrase or summarize without looking at the original source based on your understanding of the material, right? And then finally, and this is interesting, failure to be loyal to a source. If you claim that Smith argues and Smith doesn't argue, right, you're not being loyal to a source. All right. So, Office of Academic Integrity notes that it's the student responsibility, one, to learn and use formats as required by their academic discipline. And again, writing support can help with this through workshops and one-on-one consultations. We can train students to use MLA, APA, Chicago, IEEE, et cetera, in order to do that proper citing and referencing work, as well as to format in a standard way their papers. And two, it's the student's responsibility, if unsure what constitutes plagiarism, to contact their professor or GA or TA. This is where you come in, right? And this is where you've got to be prepared to explain academic integrity and its importance and the proper modes of citing and referencing. Again, writing support can help. We've got tons of resources to help you with this. Now, I've got some tips that I generally give students for avoiding plagiarism. And the first and foremost is start your assignments early. Nothing like an all-nighter to get a student desperate enough to do something rash and wind up with an academic integrity violation. So academic writing, we know this, depends on good research and careful reflection. This takes time, so be sure to give yourself not only enough time to write about your topic, but time to plan, read, and think as well. Second tip is keep copies of everything. Now, a lot of students sit down and just start writing, right? They write based on sources, they write based on the argument they want to make, et cetera, and they figure they'll put in their references later. Well, this can be a recipe for disaster because by the time you're done writing your paper, you might not be sure exactly where the research came from, right? Unless you leave yourself a trail of breadcrumbs or a roadmap to follow your thoughts back to where they began, right? So, right, in addition to this, we suggest creating a working bibliography. That way, you've got the reference right there, so it's easier to throw together that works cited page or your references page and to reference everything that you need to reference in your assignment. So keeping track, keeping good records. One thing we also suggest is that when doing research, you use a double-sided journal. On one side of the journal, you put a bibliographical reference and a summary of just what's in the source. On the other side of the journal, on the second page of that journal, you would, catalog your reaction to it, your critical appraisal of the source, your questions, criticisms, et cetera, So that way you've delineated between what's in the source and your reaction to it, right? This record can be a wonderful research when it becomes time to sit down and write. But the point is you've got to keep track of your sources, keep copies of everything. And like I say, it'll give you the time to organize your sources and make it easier to cite when needed. I remember with my dissertation, I hold a doctorate degree. I was a month and a half just citing and referencing towards the end of it. Right. I had left myself a good sort of roadmap, so that was kind of okay. But that's what happens when you've got over 3,000 references, right? So next tip: take good notes. Notes including phrases or sentences directly pasted from the source can be really valuable to your research. So be sure to use quotation marks and note page numbers so that you can give proper credit in the paper. If you're just taking notes of an idea and not the exact words, be sure to paraphrase it again without looking at the original and still jot down the page number for proper citing later. So now follow your citation style carefully. Citation styles can be nitpicky. They can. I spend half my time trying to figure out what's italicized, whether that gets a comma or a period, if it's first name, last name, or last name, first name, what sort of metadata do they need, right? Now, the people who design these systems are not trying to be mean. What they're trying to do is standardize so that anybody looking at this document knows where to go find the source. That's the principle. If I go looking for it, I should be able to find it. So the information that you're entering is information that the reader needs to go and find and check the source if they want to be sure, right? So giving proper credit shows that you know what you're talking about and that you've done your homework. So the ability to bring yourself into dialogue with research reflects well on you. You show yourself to be familiar with the experts on a topic. And final thought, remember that academic integrity and plagiarism avoidance are about 3 core values. Honesty about your work, right? Respect for yourself and for your sources. Also respect for your instructors. Fairness, right? You're not going to cheat in order to get ahead, right? You want to be fair. You want to be loyal to your sources and fair to your classmates, right? And responsibility, right? You've got to take on the responsibility for knowing what to do and actually discharging that obligation, right? And if you need more help, writing support can help you. Right. So again, we hold workshops on APA, MLA, Chicago, and IEEE. We also have PowerPoints and video tutorial resources that you might find helpful through our Blackboard page. So we have all of these resources. If you need them, they're there for you. If students might benefit from them, now you know that you can refer students to these resources on our Blackboard page, on our website, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's one thing to tell a student not to plagiarize. It's quite another to give the student the tools that they need in order to properly cite and reference, to compose their own original academic works of art. So students can also book an appointment with one of our academic writing advisors. There are a bunch of us. We all hold graduate degrees. Graduate students come to us. So use us, we're handy. So to book an appointment, follow these instructions: success.uwindsor.ca, log in with your UWIN ID and password, select writing support, select appointments, view calendar, select an appointment that works for you, and fill out what you want help with and select book. And again, it's best to book a week or more in advance because term paper season, right? Now, part 2, plagiarism prevention and detection. And this is what I tell faculty, GAs, and TAs. The interesting thing about plagiarism prevention is that there's a lot you can bake right into the course in order to sort of solve the problem before it becomes a problem. So the goal of this presentation is to encourage plagiarism prevention, to identify red flags or things in a student paper that stick out, that should make you question its originality, and to provide strategies to further address, assess and address red flag cases. So right off the bat, prevention. I'm a big believer in solving a problem before it's a problem. We should start off by noting that most of the cases you'll come across of plagiarism are unintentional. Right? So instructors and GAs and TAs can use various strategies to help prevent plagiarism. I know as a GA or a TA, you're not designing the syllabus, but there are things in the syllabus that can be included in order to stress that this issue is important and to give the students the resources to avoid academic integrity issues, right? But there are also things that you can do in your interactions with students, right, that help prevent plagiarism as well. Prevention ultimately is the goal because it empowers students to take ownership of their own academic integrity, right? So, prevention strategies. The idea is to provide clear expectations. So rate in the assignment prompts, right? If you are as clear as possible about what you're asking the student to do, it's going to avoid a lot of panic. And a panicked student is more likely to do something rash, right? However, if there's still questions, and I know I've spent hours designing assignment prompts and students still have questions. So if you're a GA or a TA and you're having students come to you with problems with the assignment prompt, there have to be ways for you to clarify these expectations and do so in sort of a masked way. I know it's when there is a point of opacity in one of my assignment prompts. What I do is I email the whole class so that they all know. If 2 or 3 students have the question, they all have the question, right? So again, solve the problem before it's a problem. Be as clear as possible. You'll be in a position where you're clarifying. On top of that, explain what constitutes plagiarism. This is something a lot of people fail to do, right? We spend a lot of time finger wagging about plagiarism. It's bad, don't do it. But students frequently still don't know what it is. So the previous presentation that I gave will give you lots of resources to explain to students what plagiarism is and why it is an important academic integrity issue to be avoided. So, and again, emphasize the importance of academic integrity. If that's something that just happens on the first day while reading off the syllabus and is never mentioned again, students aren't going to get the impression that it's very important. But really, like I say, it's the glue that holds the entire academic endeavor together, right? We can't have scholarly communities without academic integrity. And prepare students with resources. I've already given and indicated that writing support has quite a few resources. There will be more resources that are coming as part of this presentation as well. And then finally, and this is an interesting one I've started to do with my students in their writing assignments, build process into the assignments. Have them submit a proposal, have them submit a draft, have them revise the draft and resubmit. Maybe a peer review process might be something. All of this encourages students to be sort of constantly working on improving their writing while getting feedback, right? This builds in several points at which you could potentially catch a case of plagiarism before the final assignment is handed in. And then on top of that, it discourages by building process into the assignment so that the students have all done all of the smaller steps so that they aren't in the middle of a crunch writing a final 10 to 15 page paper or something along those lines, right? So that's a really smart way to prevent plagiarism. The assignment prompt can also be used to prevent plagiarism if you're asking standard questions about standard theorists that ask you to do, that ask students to provide standard evaluations. There's going to be a lot more on the internet that just does that, right? And that's when I find I get the cut paste from SparkNotes or Wikipedia or something else, right? However, if you ask something weird, quirky, and grounded in class discussion, it's going to be a whole lot harder to plagiarize. So these are things to consider as prevention strategies for your students. Now, resources for students. The writing support desk, of course, right? And we do in-class workshops. We've got our PowerPoints. We've got Blackboard. We've got the one-on-one consultations. We have resource links at uwindsor.ca/writing support. It's right on our website under writing support links. This includes Al Purdue. The online writing lab at Purdue University is invaluable. I am constantly on there. When I give a citing and referencing workshop, I usually conclude by asking, now, how are you supposed to remember all this? Well, you're not. Having a good reference page or a good reference work is absolutely essential, right? I'm on Al Purdue all the time because I'm asking myself, where does the bloody comma go, right? So is that an ampersand or an AND, right? So having something to refer to, like the online writing lab at Purdue University, or the APA style blog, or there are all these libguides that are around the internet, many of which are quite good, or just go to the manuals, right? The library has all the manuals there. So usually in electronic form too, so that you can search by topic and that sort of thing. It's good, right? But the full manuals may be a bit too much and overwhelming for students. Something like Purdue is designed for student use. And of course, you can always come see us one-on-one at the desk. We help students with citing and referencing all the time. Checking students' APA is, I'd say, 25% of what I do at the desk. So we're handy. Use us. Right. Now, there are things to consider in planning your course or planning your interactions with students. Right? You should ask yourself questions like, what strategies have you used in your course to help prevent plagiarism? Right? Like, what's the actual sort of black and white? It's within the course material. What strategies have been implemented? Right? In the past, what have been most effective or least, and what makes a strategy effective? I've tried all sorts of things, right? I've tried the come at them hard, and put the fear of God in them, plagiarism, don't do it, it's bad, finger wag with examples, and I mentioned sanctions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What this does, I found, is it scares the students, right? So they don't want to plagiarize, but then they become fearful that they have plagiarized, and that creates all sorts of additional work, right? So you can't just say, don't plagiarize without giving the students the tools to actually do careful academic work, right? So anyhow, this should be baked into your interaction strategy with students, these kinds of questions. Also, you might want to continue to brainstorm about strategies that you want to try in the future. Right? I don't know how many of you are new to TAing or GAing, but I did it for years. I did it for 2 years in my undergrad. I did it for 2 years in my master's degree. I did it for another 2 years in my doctorate degree. And I did it as a returning student with a graduate degree for a year at the University of Windsor. That's many years at this GA game, right? And what you wind up figuring out is that you've got a whole history of experience to pull on. And you can plan your interactions in a way that's going to be positive and beneficial for students and for yourself, right? Don't create unnecessary work. Like I say, solve the problem before it becomes a problem. So, red flags. These are signs that something might be amiss with a student paper. Right. So it's important to note straight off the bat that this can be difficult to identify. The software to help students plagiarize is evolving out there. It is. Most of it's still pretty bad at it because language is a living thing. And when you are trying to algorithmically produce language, it doesn't work too terribly well. That's still something humans got up on machines. But nonetheless, right, it can be difficult to identify a case of either intentional or unintentional plagiarism. Now, services like SafeAssign or Turnitin.com, that sort of thing, are not, foolproof. They're not. There are many cases of false positives from SafeAssign, for example. Because classes are using the same terminology and turns of phrase and that sort of thing to describe ideas or make arguments or provide analysis and that sort of thing. And if there's a lot of technical terminology that's in there, these algorithms are going to pick it up as used in other papers, right? So there can be false positives there, right? Yeah, I know from experience, I've got a library of papers that I know are plagiarized, and I've toyed with putting them through plagiarism checkers, and they come out as though they are not sometimes. False negatives occur as well. So tools like SafeAssign are really there to give the student the impression that they're not going to get away with it, right? Rather than be a foolproof method for catching plagiarism. That far, they're reasonably effective because students are afraid that they're going to get caught and they know someone's checking, right? Even if that someone is something, and even if that something is bad at checking. So you can't really rely on these, but they do have some sort of effective use. The best way to do this is the old-fashioned way, manually detecting red flags, and this can help create teachable moments, which is what we want, right? I know I didn't get into the academic game in order to prosecute students, haul them before tribunals and tell them how bad. That's not what I want to be spending my time doing. And like I say, most cases of plagiarism are unintentional. So these students need instruction, right? Not punishment, right? So creating these teachable moments, if you get a SafeAssign report that says it's 59% plagiarized and you confront a student with that, that's not a conversation about their work. Whereas, I noticed your font changed here and your tenses changed, et cetera, et cetera. You can point out these red flags. So this had me start Googling your assignment, and what I found is that your entire schema came from this website, which was unsighted. You need to cite this. So, right, that way you get into a conversation that's actually about the student's work with the student, right? And you can show them in their work what they've maybe done wrong and what they need to do better the next time. So, limitations. These are just tips, right? These are tips that work some of the time. There's no silver bullet here, right? Red flags don't always relate to academic dishonesty, and we note that throughout this presentation that sometimes this red flag is a sign of something other than plagiarism, but nonetheless, right, you should take a closer look, right? So it's important, right, as evaluators to avoid jumping to conclusions, right? Or put another way, give the student the benefit of the doubt. Don't say, "Ha, you've plagiarized," and go to the next step. Maybe ask yourself questions about why, what other possible explanations there are, right? So there are clues or red flags. Now, when the format changes mid-paper, the type changes size, color, or font, or other formatting inconsistencies like the percentage sign versus percent, or healthcare versus healthcare hyphenated, right? These are signs that you've got sort of a kit bash going on with the sources, right? There's something weird that's going on with the sources because, maybe you got to take a closer look at this anyway. These all may also be technical or computer errors, right? But check this example out. If the paper suddenly switches from Times New Roman to Arial and back again, or has sections in size 12, 10, and 14 font, you may want to double check the content for other signs of plagiarism. So what we're introducing here with these red flags are sort of multi-factor checks, right? But nonetheless, font changes, font color changes, and format inconsistencies are a sign that, something inconsistent has happened within the context of this paper, right? And we generally expect a student to write with sort of one voice, right? Maybe that's naive, but nonetheless, you see, the problem is when you cut and paste from the internet, what you do is you bring the formatting from that with it, and it's not always easy to get rid of either, right? So this is a sign that something might be amiss, but there could be other explanations. That's the case with all of these. So if you see that happen, check it. Inconsistent citations format. Like if the citations change mid-paper or use an unfamiliar format to the discipline, that's a red flag. May also be the result of student oversight or confusion. Maybe they just don't know how to cite and reference. Right? So check this out. If the paper is in APA format but suddenly includes IEEE or Chicago citations, this could be a sign of material being borrowed verbatim from elsewhere, IEEE form. Another possible sign is citations that appear in text but not in a reference list or vice versa, although this may be due to legitimate oversight, right? In either case, right, if there's a problem with the citations, there's an academic integrity problem there because you're supposed to be consistent and clear. Again, the principle of citing and referencing is if I want to go find it, I should be able to, right? So nonetheless, right, so citations lacking or infrequent. So if your assignment outside sources are required, but there are no citations, that's a red flag. Maybe the result of a misunderstanding. They just don't understand citation or the rules for paraphrasing, right? But take this example. Studies show that plagiarism detection software is not necessarily effective, although, quote, Turnitin did not respond to multiple requests for comment, end quote. Well, if it's a quote, who said it? Where did it come from? Where can I go find it? Right? So things like that, again, are red flags. That one's just, a failure to cite. So it's pretty clear cut, right? But nonetheless, sometimes students don't know when to use quotation marks. Might I suggest our punctuation workshop, right, at Writing Support. So note the lack of citation there. Now, inconsistent tone. If the paper has sections with informal language, slang, and contractions, and then it's suddenly full of complex terminology, that's a red flag. References to material outside the scope of the paper are another good one. I know when I present material in the context of my classes, they're frequently first-year undergrad classes. So while there's more complex sort of research on the topics, I don't necessarily introduce that. I'm introducing the general idea and seeing whether students can work around within the section of theory that I'm presenting. So when I see a term like, for example, eudaimonia used, and I did not use the term eudaimonia, I know they've gone to a source other than the course material, right? So that's a red flag. Now, take this passage, more sophisticated than past. This was the case with that student that I was talking about earlier with the cheathouse.com, more sophisticated than past work by the same student. The student had like 2 papers that were at C- range, and then all of a sudden there's this beautiful prose, right? There's something amiss there. Right? So look for these kinds of inconsistencies. Now, our example, writing papers right is kind of hard, but it is imperative that students consider the consequences that accompany academic integrity offenses and the associated ethical implications. That's a red flag right there. Writing papers is kind of hard, right? But then it's beautiful, right? So you should check that. Irrelevant material. Now, this happens sometimes, especially when students are trying to plagiarize their way through and they don't really understand the topic, right? Information unrelated to the topic can be possibly borrowed from an outside source or a prior assignment. Look for perspective shifts mid-paper, right? Like we interviewed when it's an individual paper. This may also be related to disorganization or lack of focus, or So take this passage. In my 30 years in education administration, I've learned how to effectively detect plagiarism in student papers. If a student in a first-year class handed me this, I would know in my 30 years of educational administration, that's not them. So there's something amiss here. You better check it for plagiarism. Odd word choices. Now, take a sentence that is, you might come across a sentence that's grammatically sound, but nouns, verbs, and adjectives just seem odd. This is a possible thesaurus paraphrase. In a second, I'm going to talk about Quillbot or paraphrasing programs as well that basically do a thesaurus paraphrase that just replaces words with synonyms, right? However, this could also be an ESL or translation issue, right? So again, give those students the benefit of the doubt. Take this sentence here. Not only is a lot finishes in a broadsheet that does not make logic, but also is not ample word switching to duck theoretical veracity questions. What in the world is that? You'd be surprised at how often you come across sentences like that. Well, let's go. This is not only likely that this not only likely results in a paper that does not make sense, but also is not adequate paraphrasing to avoid academic integrity issues. Right? You see, that's a thesaurus paraphrase or a Quillbot paraphrase, but paraphrasing that way is not adequate because this is still exactly the same. All you've done is put in synonyms, right? Paraphrasing involves digesting, again, the source, right, and presenting your understanding of that source in a novel way, right? So, yeah, odd word choice is something to watch out for. And this is partially why Google searches don't always turn up cases of plagiarism, right? Because that does not make, right? But also is not, right? These are the things that you would Google, right? But you're not going to find many hits there, right? But generally students make more than one mistake in a paper, so it's findable. So online services, as said, I talk about Quillbot, such as Quillbot claim to be paraphrasing tools, but really it's just a word replacement tactic. Students who are uncomfortable with paraphrasing may turn to these tools. There it is, right? It works, I don't know, maybe I'm dating myself here, a lot like Babelfish used to work, that translation program, where you type in an English phrase and it just one-to-one sort of algorithmically translates it into, I don't know what, German, that sort of thing. So the thing is, it's pretty bad at it, right? At this point, these paraphrasing programs aren't very good. So you put in the phrase, right? And you switch the words around. This one switched signification to meaning, simultaneously becomes the same time as, right, et cetera, one another or each other, that sort of thing. And you see how this is not adequate, right? While we were playing around with this PowerPoint, my colleague and I put in a hunk from my dissertation, and I engaged the theory and arguments from a Detroit scholar and activist by the name of Grace Lee Boggs. It was detecting the word grace as a word and not a proper name. So it kept switching grace, which was really, really awkward. Anyhow, this is something to watch out for. So if you come across it, now you know what it is. Now, a shift in tense. If the tenses shift mid-paper without grammatical reason, that's a red flag. This can suggest a source in a different tense was incorporated verbatim, and although it could be a grammatical error or an ESL issue, right? Some people are bad at tenses. So take this example. Plagiarism is a complicated issue that can be prevented using simple solutions. These included past tense, providing resources and clear expectations, right? Immediately it's a grammatical issue, but you should ask a question about whether a source with a different tense was incorporated verbatim, right? Now, it's online, right? On the one hand, students are really, really tempted to use sources and not cite them because of the online format for like even on campus classes have a certain sort of mixed sort of mode of delivery, right? So if you take one of my courses on campus, you're going to be communicating with me, you're going to find your assignments, you're going to submit your assignments, you're going to interact with discussion forums on Blackboard, right? So, right, a lot of people have noted that with this incorporation of online teaching, plagiarism instances have gone up pretty significantly. Now, on the one hand, students think that, hey, this information's there, it's easy to plagiarize, but on the other hand, if they can find it, I can find it. If something's suspicious, use quotation marks for an exact phrase lookup in a search engine. Do it with a few phrases. Pro tip, remove introductory words or phrases. This can help as well, right? Because how students wind up appropriating information from sources is to tack on a new transition or introductory phrase, right? Kind of sort of makes it look like their own. So that's a good tip as well. With the kind of paraphrasing or sloppy sort of thesaurus paraphrasing that kind of goes on, you might not be able to find the exact phrase, but the more experience you get, the more you kind of realize that students tend to draw from the same well. So if it's online, Google the topic and see what comes up in the first 5 searches, and then look for schemas, right? So if the topic, the information is being presented in a step-by-step sort of progression that is the same as what you find online, that could be a red flag as well. Look closer. Now, not all plagiarized papers use a source that's searchable online either, right? So, you might not be able to do this. So you just isolate these turns of phrase that you find odd and see what you come up with. It's not foolproof. So here's another suggestion. Check the file details, right? When was it created? When was it modified? By who? Right? That sort of thing. And then remember that these tips will not help detect all instances of plagiarism. You're not going to catch them all. You're not. But what you're going to do by, trying to and taking this topic seriously is communicating to students that these are values that are important to adopt if they want to exist within a scholarly community at the university, right? So you might help to instill some good habits in students as well. This is pedagogical. Always investigate further to avoid jumping to conclusions as well. This is the whole thing, right? When I do my song and dance about plagiarism right at the beginning of a semester when I teach courses, I do a lot of quoting the definition, giving examples, talking about sanctions, and finger wagging. But that puts me in a position I don't want to be in, right? I don't want to be, the investigator and prosecutor here, right? And what I frequently point out to students is, this is the first day. I've just met you. I've just met you, and you haven't done anything. So here I am, point my finger at you saying, plagiarism is bad, don't do it. And students wind up being put in the position of being accused, even though they haven't done anything. So avoid jumping to conclusions, right? Most students are good students. They just want to succeed. Sometimes they struggle, sometimes they falter, sometimes they make mistakes. This is why it's important to recognize that plagiarism is often the result of a misunderstanding. So what we should be aiming for are teachable moments that can help prevent future academic dishonesty, right? So say you found a case of plagiarism. If you're a TA or a GA, most times you hand it to the member of faculty you're working for, and that's as far as it goes for you. However, if you're curious what happens to this after, well, there are a number of specific steps that it has to go to. The faculty member meets with the student about the alleged misconduct. and they attempt to have a teachable moment, right? If the incident is resolved, it's resolved. Stop there. However, if there's no resolution, then it goes to the AAU head to resolve or proceed with the allegation. If it's resolved there, stop there. Right? However, if it's still not resolved, it goes to the associate dean. And they have two choices: dismiss the case or sanction the student. Right? If the incident is resolved, stop there. However, the students have rights. Right? They have the option to appeal to a disciplinary committee. Then it goes full rigmarole committee, right? And that committee makes the appeal decision, and that decision is final, and the university secretariat updates records of the incident. Now, this is time consuming. The whole process is time consuming, and I've been through it 30 or 40 times. My records are spotty on that. I forget, they blend together like James Bond films, right? But nonetheless, this whole process is a time vampire. You are much better to have a teachable moment with the student, right? Where they understand what they've done wrong. They're given the resources they need to succeed, and it can end right there, right? That is better, but that's up to the member of faculty. Your job is detect and report, right? Unless the faculty member suggests otherwise. So, but this process can be extremely involved and can take weeks to get through. So now, still not sure what to do? Either contact the University of Windsor Office of Academic Integrity or visit them online for more information about how to respond to a case of plagiarism. Lots of resources there. And of course, here are our references, just because we don't want to be accused of plagiarism ourselves. So thank you. And if you need anything, Writing Support's here to support you. Writing Support's here to support your students. Writing Support's here to support the faculty you're working with. If you need anything from us, you can email us at writingsupport@uwindsor.ca. Thank you to the organizers for having us in here, and thank you to you all for your time and attention. Have good days, one for each of you. Take care.